Well, hi everybody. Father Alex here. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. I'm the host of the Godcast. I'm the vicar of St Matthew's Church, and I am also the author of Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar, a priest story, which is available in all good bookshops even, and online, Waterstones, etc. My guest today on the Godcast is Reverend Jayne Manfredi. Jayne is a theologian and she is a broadcaster, and we're going to be talking about her new book, Waking the Women, Faith, Menopause, and the Meaning of Midlife. So I do hope you enjoy this conversation. If you do, then do please subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on X. You'll find me there at AlexDJFrost. But for now, enjoy this Godcast with Jayne Manfredi. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is Reverend Jayne Manfredi. She is an author, she's a broadcaster, and we're going to find out a little bit more about her new book, which is out anytime now, called Waking the Woman, Faith, Menopause, and the Meaning of Midlife. Jayne, it's fab to get you on the Godcast. How are you?
I'm really, really good. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. I'm very keen to talk about this subject with you this afternoon. But before we get to that, Jayne, just tell us a little bit about your working context and about you are ordained minister, aren't you? And just tell us a bit about your work and where you are.
Okay, well, I live in Crewe, in the northwest. Some people might know that. Never really mention it, but that's where I live. I was born here, lived here for all but 6 years of my life. Most of my children, I've got four kids. Three of them were born here, same as me. I'm a mum first and foremost. I'm a wife. I'm a teacher as well. I trained to be a history teacher, and now I do a bit of teaching part time. And I'm a writer, as you've said. I also sometimes, several times a year, do the Thought for the Day segment on BBC Radio 4, and I'm also a deacon.
So quite a lot there, really. So the faith aspect. When were you ordained, Jayne? Have you been ordained a while now, or
No, I was ordained in July 2022.
has that changed life for you in any way, or?
Just a little bit, yeah. Yeah, it's been a bit of an unexpected journey, really. I had a pretty devastating experience of church leadership, which led to me resigning from my curacy. That was in December 2022. And I think the church talks a lot about calling and the ministries that we're called into, but I don't think we talk enough about the fact that God sometimes calls us out of situations and places where we're not flourishing. And that was definitely my experience. And Yeah, I'd not really talked much about it, or for someone who, write, I'm quite an honest writer. I haven't really written about it either. Um, I think because I don't want to do that from a place of woundedness. I am a real believer in talking about things and writing about things from our scars instead of our wounds. And right now, I would be doing that from a place of real woundedness. And I don't think that would represent Jesus very well.
I
um,
think that's very wise counsel, Jayne. I'm like yourself, very blessed that I'm a published author, and what I've written in my book is about some real personal stuff. Some of it about scars, but some of it about just grief and whatnot. And that period of time does give you a bit of wisdom, I think, doesn't it? And so you probably will then probably write about it at some point, but only when it feels right, I guess.
yeah, definitely. And I think to return to the point about God calling us out of things, if I hadn't have been called out of full-time church-based ministry, I would never have written my book. And that came from it arose from a pastoral need more than anything else. Not just my own need, but the need of other women who I talk to about menopause and faith. So it's a real, I hope it's a real piece of ministry. And it's my writing's definitely a way that I hope to minister to other people.
Yeah, just before we talk about the book, a little bit about the thought for the day. A few of my friends are given that honor to write and then present and tell the nation. Do you enjoy that process? Do you get much autonomy in what you're going to say? Or are you kind of giving a brief just for people who, because becoming, I think it's actually becoming more and more popular now. Just tell us how that kind of shapes itself.
Well, I came into Thought for the Day in December 2020. So they had the Today program had I think they might do this every year actually, a guest editor slot. Each program was being for every Saturday, I think in December, was being guest edited. And whoever it was, I forget, which is terrible, whoever it was that was guest editing for that particular day that I was brought in for wanted a new voice, somebody who was a bit different, somebody who wrote with humor, which I think I try to. And that was how I was invited to do it. And originally it was just as a one-off. And then it was well received. And because I was able to, I actually gave them two scripts in the end because I wasn't sure which they'd like best. And because I was able to do that, they then said, oh, well, you'd be able to do this on a regular day because the turnaround is quite tight. So what usually happens is this is how my day goes anyway. If I'm doing it, it's written the day before, and in my case it's pre-recorded the day before as well, but some people deliver theirs live. So I will get up early on the morning. So for example, my thought was broadcast this morning, so yesterday I will have got up. I tend to start the day by looking at what's current because it's supposed to be, obviously the whole point of it, it's a topical issue or a news story. So a live thing that you're meant to be commenting on from a faith perspective. So I'll start by looking and seeing what people are saying, what news stories. Sometimes it ends up being a news story that you absolutely can't ignore. It's on every single web page. It's on every single paper. For example, I did one about Prince Harry and Meghan, which was the day, because it was the day after they'd done their Oprah interview, and there was no other news story. I'm not sure. This was right early on in my Thought for the Day career. And I'm not sure I'd have the courage to do it now, actually, because the backlash was absolutely horrendous. Because it's one of those that there are a few sort of hot button topics that you can't go near without you're going to upset somebody no matter what you say. And I knew that was one of those topics, and the backlash for that was quite horrible. I ended up in the Daily Mail. I think that they did two pieces about it. They hated it so much. And I don't read the Daily Mail, but my family was sharing it online and saying, Jayne's annoyed the Daily Mail. So it was kind of a bit of a badge of honor, really. But
Yeah.
So autonomy, you have obviously it's the BBC, so there are quite strict editorial guidelines that you have to follow. If you're a preacher, so that's obviously your background too, and it was my background. You have to resist the temptation to preach. You're not there to preach at people. The majority of the people listening are probably not practicing Christians. You're preaching to a whole range of different people of all faiths and none. So you have to bear that in mind. So you can't assume Christian knowledge. You can't assume that people know what you're talking about if you're using Christianese or any kind of jargon. And then it goes through you work with a producer, and it goes through a process of them okaying your script. Then it goes up further to the head of religion and ethics, and then it gets signed off. It's fun.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I've been lucky again with my publication to do a bit of telly and radio, and it's an occupational hazard, isn't it? That whatever you say, I mean, you at the end of the day, you're expressing an opinion or a thought. It's open to criticism, isn't it? And I suppose I don't know about you, but I've become quite thick-skinned, and I kind of know that somebody might take objection to something I've said or written or a question I've asked on the podcast. That's quite common, So I suppose it's good for the resilience, isn't it?
Yeah, I think being online, having any kind of I hate to use the word platform because I'm only very small platform, but it's a platform of sorts, I suppose. Especially if you're on Twitter X, you, yeah, you have to develop a thick skin because
Yeah.
people will come at you with all sorts of all sorts of stuff
Yeah.
that you have to ignore, take with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
And also, you get really lovely feedback as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose you have to just be balanced with it. No matter
Yeah.
how somebody's coming and telling you how marvelous you are, there's someone to come along and tell you that
Yeah.
tell you you're definitely not. So you have to be
Absolutely.
balanced. It's probably a good thing
Yeah.
in some
Well,
ways.
well, Jane, as we're recording this, it is actually World Menopause Day, isn't it? And you're on the precipice of releasing, publishing your book. Is this an exciting time, just waiting for it to kind of get out there, and then let's start listening to exactly what we've been talking about, those joyful affirmations of the work, and I'm sure there'll be one or two who go, "What the hell is this about?"
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really excited about it. It's my first book. It's my dream from being tiny. Since I was 8 years old, I've been writing. My great auntie was a legal secretary, and she gave me when I was 8 years old a massive, big metal typewriter. It was a huge thing, and I loved it. And I used to pound away on that, writing stories. And I wrote a whole novel when I was 19 that still sits on a floppy disk or something somewhere. So I've always wanted to write, and I love it. So that is really joyful. The thought that it's going to be out, and you'll know this from when you had your own book out. When you first see your book, it's marvelous, isn't it? And it's
Magical.
given my family so much joy as well, because
Yeah.
no one else in my family's written a book, and it's made my parents really proud. And finally, and
I love that. I love your story of the typewriter. When I was a boy, my grandma gave me a typewriter, and you won't remember World of Sport, Jayne Manfredi, but there used to be people behind the presenter kind of typing up the football results and all the incoming
I think I
sports
remember
news.
that. Did they do that on Grandstand
It
as
was on
well?
it was on ITV. I think they might have done it on Grandstand, but I always pretended I was that person in the background. And I used to spend Saturday afternoons creating match reports and all sorts. I was a strange child, but there we are.
I mean, so was I. Well, I'm a strange adult, so yeah.
So let's talk about the menopause, Jane. Recently, my wife and I, who is my wife Sarah's an advanced nurse practitioner, so she's well versed in medical matters. And we were doing the NC 500. We were driving up the west coast of Scotland and coming down the east side. And I just happened to say, I mean, I was telling her that you were coming on my Godcast, and I said, so. What are the symptoms of the menopause? And the list was pretty significant, and it took me surprised as a 55-year-old bloke that hadn't ever asked that question before. So I suppose my question is, where's the start? Where was the starting point for your subject matter? How did you go about creating what you wanted to say?
Well, when I was training for ministry, I went to the Queen's Foundation in Birmingham, which is brilliant, by the way, if anyone's listening and you want a good theology college, Queen's is fabulous. And I was in my so I'm 45 now. So I was around 42 at the time that I started thinking about this subject. And obviously it's an absolute explosion in popular culture. There's lots of conversation happening about this at the moment. It has been for a few years now. Very some very high profile celebrities like Davina McCall who have really highlighted it. So I was very aware of it as a live issue. And obviously, as soon as you hit 40 as a woman, you become slowly more aware of it anyway, I think. And in my final year of theology college, we had to write a pastoral liturgy essay on one stage of the life cycle. And you could do it on birth or death or childhood. And I thought, well, I'll do it on midlife and menopause then. And that was when I discovered that there was just nothing, there was nothing about it, theologically speaking. In the end, I found a really fabulous paper given by Reverend Julie Gittos, which I've actually used in my own book. And I think there was an article by Elaine Storkey, but other than that, there was just nothing at all, really. So I thought, okay, I need this needs to be talked about. Why, the world seems to be talking about it. Why is the church not talking about it? So I went online and said to the women that I know online, does anyone else concerned that we're not talking about this? Does anyone else feel that we should talk about it? And I was absolutely inundated with women saying, I want to talk about this, and this is happening to me, and nobody's talking about it. And why aren't we talking about it? So we had a Zoom meeting. We all just sort of chatted. It was very informal, and that kind of got the ball rolling, really. And after that, I was obviously ordained, and then had stuff happening that was made life really difficult. And then in February of 2023, I did a thought for the day about menopause. It was related to a news story. Obviously, it has to be topical. There was a news story about it, and I did it on that. And after that, I was approached by a couple of publishers to say, would you like to write something about this long form? And that was how it came about.
And and it's fascinating because I've spoken to a few feminist theologians in recent times. It's Helen King. I don't know if you know Professor Helen King.
Yeah, and
Yeah, she's written a book called Immaculate Forms, and we've had Dr. Karen on recently. And surprisingly, there is, or maybe or unsurprisingly, there is a desire from publishers to publish stuff about this subject matter. Did that surprise you that you were approached?
um, um, no, not really. I wasn't surprised. And I think that that's the publishing world just getting on board with popular culture, really. I think that you can't help but notice that this is happening. This is a real pardon the pun, but hot topic of conversation. So I think that it didn't surprise me. My commissioning editor at Canterbury is David Shervington, and so he's a young man, and if I'm really, I mean, yeah. So it's well outside his area of interest or experience, but he was totally supportive, completely on board with it, which is brilliant, because it has to be a conversation that men are invited into. Otherwise, it doesn't work if it's just women talking amongst themselves. One of the comments that a few women said to me was that they have, like, I don't know, a male archdeacon or a male training incumbent, and I'm going through this thing at the moment and I feel so embarrassed and I don't know how to tell him. Well, give him a copy of my book. May ask him to read it.
Yeah,
He will understand better about what you're going through.
yeah,
That's my hope, anyway.
yeah. And you mentioned Davina McCall. Obviously, there's books from the mainstream, but you're writing this from a theological perspective. Just share with us, Jayne, some of the things that maybe took you by surprise, or some of the revelations that you discovered. You said there wasn't an awful lot out there as it was. So just share
No,
with
I
us some
think
of those things.
Yeah, I think now I've heard that there is theological research happening now. There are people doing dissertations on this, and people that are looking into it. I think that's fabulous. As I said, I don't. I suppose, yes, it's a book. My book is about faith. I talk about God. I talk about the Bible. But I don't think, I mean, it's very flattering for you to put me in the same in the same breath as Karen and Helen. But they're academics, and I very much am not an academic. And I've relied on the work of fabulous academics whilst writing my own book, but I was very keen that I wanted it to be a book that was sat somewhere outside academia, so that it would be more accessible. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to, I'm not saying that academic books aren't accessible, because they are, but that wasn't the place that I was coming from. Sorry, I've forgotten what you asked me. You asked me something
Well, just some
different,
of
didn't
some of
you?
the things, just some of the things that maybe took you by surprise when you were writing the book. You go, "Oh, I didn't know that," or those kind of, and also the humor aspect of it, Jane. I'm 55. My wife's a few years behind us. We're going through, we're experiencing this journey together, and I have to say, without humor, also we would find some things a bit of a challenge. I'll give you an example. One of us might be in a room freezing cold, I and me. We talked to, and my wife comes like, "Oh, is the heating on?" And it's that kind of, and we end up having a bit of a giggle about it. So just some of the things that surprised you or enlightened you, or you found humorous in the process.
I mean, I find most things funny, to be honest. I find bodies very funny. I find people very funny. I find life is just generally just really ridiculous. And I think that God delights in that. I think God delights in humor. One of my one of the stories that I actually cover in the book is about Sarah, so Abraham's wife. It's one of my favorite passages in scripture where the three holy visitors come when they're in the desert, and Sarah overhears through the tent flaps that she's going to become a mother, and she's post-menopause. She is unable to have children. And that's obviously, the fact that she's unable to have children is absolutely key to her story. And yet here she is hearing that you're going to be fruitful, you're going to have a child. And she laughs, and I just love that. I love that whole scene. I love it. And I love that God then says to her, "Well, you laughed." And she's like, "I didn't laugh." "You did." You did laugh. And I just really love that. So I delighted in retelling that from a menopausal perspective, as opposed to how Sarah's story often gets told, which is obviously from a perspective of infertility. And so, yeah, I just delighted in that. And yeah, there was a few. I just really loved it. I just really loved the writing of it. I loved delving into it. I loved exploring it from that perspective of, oh, how would I read this if I was reading, as a menopausal woman. How would I read that? How does that sound differently? How can I tell this in a way that might speak hope for women like me, women older than me?
Yeah, and you talked about men accessing it as well. You know, uh, do you think men are ready to do that yet? People of a certain generation. I'm like I say, I'm 55. I'm happy to talk about these things, but I think it's come through having conversations about feminine issues and trying to understand them and relate to them. I wouldn't instantly walk into Waterstones like I want to find a book on the menopause. So what's the selling point? Why should men bother? Why should they take the time to read your book, Jane?
Well, the main reason is because, especially if you are if you're a church leader, if you are involved in ministry at all, churches are full of women. They're full of women. There is a real gender bias towards women in the church, and we know this from research. We also know that most of these women are over the age of 40. Overwhelmingly over the age of 50. So these women are either going through this right now or have already been through it. So I think you can only minister more sensitively, more kindly, more empathetically to your female parishioners or fellow members of your congregation, to your relatives, to your female friends, if you understand what they might be going through. And that is a big might, because women aren't a monolith. There's a whole range of experiences that you might have at this this life stage, from women whose periods might just stop overnight and have friends who that was it. There was no symptoms or nothing. They just stopped, to women who will have just a decade of really horrendous symptoms and ill health running up to it, and then beyond as well. But the more that the church as a whole understands this, the more we can talk about it, the less shame women will feel about having to endure experiences that might be unbearable for them. So it will help people's ministry, I think, definitely, and Christian discipleship.
Yeah. I mean, I hope this doesn't sound patronizing, but I think the more and more feminine voices we can hear, uh, on all aspects of ministry, actually, I think is for the benefit of the church. What's your what's your kind of feeling about the kind of the female impression on the church as it stands, Jayne? There's still an awful lot of misogyny knocking around, isn't there? And there's we've come from a place of men ruling the roost, as it were. Do you think the church is making adequate progress? Do you want to see faster and more progress in this area?
Um, don't really know. I think one of the things that I know, that there are some fabulous women bishops who are doing just really wonderful work. I know Rachel Truitt does fabulous work with women's prisons, and
Mm,
there's other bishops, like female bishops I could name, who are also doing God's good work. Um, but really, what concerns me more than any gender gap is the class bias. That would be the thing that I'm more concerned about than gender, actually, because I think we still don't promote, uplift, or respect working class leaders. And I think, hey,
I'm waiting for people who are listening to this. I'm waving my arm and they're like, "Go on, Jayne,
yeah,
speak
I
up to the
mean,
sister."
people that sound like us. How
Yeah,
often do you hear a bishop that, and that's no disrespect intended to any bishop at all, but they still do come from a very tiny pool, and that's not reflecting the full glory of God,
yeah,
to my mind. And so I would say, in terms of leadership, I'm more concerned about the lack of working class representation in leadership than I am
yeah.
about gender.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jayne, we're on the same page there, my friend. I'm for my sins and how long it will last, I don't know. But I'm on General Synod and I'm actually raised a private members motion for a national strategy for working class vocations. I'd like to see an apprenticeship scheme, for example. But also the fact that when we talk about working class, we're not talking about. I think there's an assumption when I say that people think, oh, we don't want, you want people who aren't very clever. And I'm,
Yeah, I've seen you talking about this on X. I've seen people challenge you about it, and it's enraging, actually, because
I have to explain every time, Jayne, that, and that really, I'm going to swear on my God, that pisses me off because it's like I've never said that. I've never said people that I grew up with and who I work with are thick. They are often the most intelligent, articulate, um, entrepreneurial people I've ever met. I've just been with a family earlier, and they're like, "You're blowing me away with your understanding of a particular situation." And personally, I think the church is crying out for that.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, and I think a lot of the time, the working class people who get to speak tend to be the ones who go down the academic route. Um, and again, that's not to disrespect any of those people who are also doing fabulous work. We need working class academics, of course we do, but there's more than one way to share the gospel. There is more than one way to be a leader, and until the Church of England um, finds ways to respect that, and to reflect it, we're never going to move on. We're never going to move on.
yeah, it is a worry for me, and there are so many things raging in the church, and everybody's got an opinion about something, whether it's living in love and faith, whether it's about whatever it is. But there is underlying all that, there is an issue where the church is in rapid decline, and is and I'm in synod thinking somebody's not even woke up and smelt the coffee on this one. They're too busy wittering about stuff that's like the church is in free fall, but actually in the context that I work in a very working class urban parish. Most of my work is with mums.
Yeah.
A lot of them are single mums, but they are uh, they're to me they're natural leaders because that's what they've been doing for such a long period of time. You
Yeah, when
know,
I went through BAP, which was obviously feels like a million years ago, it was back in 2017. The that was back when you had to hit, it's different now, isn't it? But back then you had to hit this 9 criteria. And the one that I was most concerned about was the leadership one. But I was a single mum and it teaches you all sorts of things about how to lead, how to lead in ways which I yeah, you definitely find helpful as a leader in the church, and obviously that's not where my current ministry lies, but it was helpful. It really was a useful experience.
yeah, I think again, it sounds patronizing, but people like you, Jane, are inspiring. You're the voices that people would need to hear, and then the people that will respond as well. They will respond to a voice like yours. I mean, somebody who speaks the perfect Queen's English just doesn't resonate in places like Burnley. And I mean, I know parts of Crewe are quite nice, aren't they? But in good old earthy Crewe, in the north and these urban provincial towns, they need authenticity and all power to your elbow. I really hope people listen to you more. And I know you described it as a small voice, but yeah, I think you're affecting change, and so I'm really pleased to encourage that. Really.
Oh,
So the
thank
so
you.
so so the book, Jane, is not far away. Then have you got a copy there? Is it
I
or
have
not? Let's give
actually.
it a wave. Let's give it some promotion.
I've got it. Oh, this it's the wrong way around. There must be some mirror function on
It
my
looks all
camera.
right on my screen.
All right, good. Yeah, that's the book.
So tell.
It's only a small book, so gentlemen, it won't take long to read if you did want a copy. It's out next Thursday, 24th of October. Um, and then there is a launch event locally, which you can find out about online. But I think that's actually sold out, but they've told me that the reserve list for tickets, so um it'll be held in a bigger venue or something if those sell out too. So
Yeah,
we'll
I think it
see.
can be got. People can buy it on Amazon. Is in
Yeah, it's
bookshops.
available. It's available everywhere. So
Isn't it
all the
great to be able to
usual.
say that? Yeah, it's
I
everywhere.
know. It's really, really exciting. And thank you for having me on to let me
Yeah.
talk about it.
Well, I must try and get a signed copy off you some point, and
I will send
that'd
you
be
that
awesome.
one. I will send you that one.
That wasn't a hint, by the way. That was just like, but it'd be nice if I could read it and then pass it on to my wife, and we can, share it together. So,
Oh, I
well,
hope you enjoy it.
yeah. Jane, thanks for coming on. It's been lovely talking to you. It's been lovely meeting you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for supporting working class ministry. And we just wish you really well with the book. And thanks for coming on the Godcast.
Thanks so much. Thank you.